It's time for the Douglas Coleman Show. Mr. Smooth and Savvy is joined by guests from all walks of life, from the entertainment industry to authors to political and social commentators, the famous and not so famous, the controversial and the light and fluffy. We have it all. Now, here's Douglas Coleman.
Okay, please welcome back to the Douglas Coleman Show, Halie, Loren. Hi, Halie. Welcome back.
Hi. Thank you so much for having me back. It's been a while.
Yeah, we looked it up. You know, you were on in 2015, which was amazing because we had just started the show. And I think we were still on FM when you were on, because that's long gone.
My goodness.
Now. So it's been a while.
Yeah, and considering everything that's happened since then, it's been like, what, 20 years?
Well, feels like it. It feels like 50 years. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
But I'm looking at your one sheet, and I remember the album, Butterfly Blue was the release that you were doing at that point when you were on.
Mm-hmm,
that must have been your new one. I remember somebody in the chat room bought your CD like while we were talking. I'm remembering that now.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, it was because we were sort of live in those days. And that, again, is something that's changed. I haven't done live in a long time and have no desire to go back to it at all.
Little higher pressure.
Well, pre-recorded is, it's just easier. And, you know, if something messes up, you can stop. The worst part about doing a live show was that the things that people remember are always the goofs. Like if there's some kind of technical issue, if the phone call drops out or something like that, people will say oh, that was funny when you were talking to yourself for 10 minutes and didn't realize that the other person had gone. And, you know, that's not what I want to be remembered for.
No, not unless that's the intention, I guess, if you're wanting to make people laugh with blunders.
Well,
you know,
exactly.
Then it could be a thing. It could be your calling card, but I don't know if you want that.
No, well, the Monty Python of podcasts is not really what I had in mind. But so anyways, a lot has changed. We're not on FM radio anymore, and I've got a video show that we're doing, and lots of stuff. And I see on your sheet you've done a lot since 2015. COVID must have been a real problem, though, because you're primarily a live performer, yeah?
Yeah, I had quite an epic touring schedule ahead of me, set for 2020. I thought it was going to be the year of breaking through in some areas that I'd not really been able to tour before, and I was so excited. And then, of course, everything just collapsed.
Yeah,
it's like a row of dominoes, just one thing after another. Pretty much within the span of 2 weeks, I lost my entire 2020 calendar. And everybody else did, too. So it wasn't just me. Definitely wasn't a personal thing. But, yeah, it was pretty big blow, and then we readjusted, and I ended up doing my first live stream concerts that I'd ever done, and I continued that through at least those first couple of years, and kind of have regained some of the shows that I had lost the opportunity to do back then. They were re-added slowly throughout the last couple of years to my calendar, and some of the things haven't come back, so so it goes. That's life.
Well, are the jazz festivals, did they just cancel forever because of COVID? Some of them did, right?
Some of them, I'm sure, yeah. I know of a couple, I think, that have not really come back yet, or maybe they won't. I don't really know, but a lot of them did. Some of them shifted strategy a little bit, shifted their approach. They cut back. Some of them are thriving just as much as ever. It really ranges, just like with other live venues that are year-round. Some of those went away forever, and others have come back in different forms, or even better than before. And some are still sort of trying to find their feet. And it's been quite a ride for everyone in the music industry, from what I can tell.
So how long have you been in the music industry?
I have been a professional performing artist since I was 14. And
you don't have to give your age
gosh,
if you don't want to.
No, honestly, doing math on the fly is not my strong suit. So over 20 years.
Okay.
Over 20 years. I've seen a lot of change.
So a long time.
So, yeah, a long time. It's been quite an interesting time actually to have gone from being very young performing artist during a whole different era of music than even what it was 10 years ago, but especially nowadays. There's been a lot of change in a very short amount of time.
Well, the music industry's been turned upside down about 4 times now. I mean, I think it's, it started with, CDs probably, and then digital sampling, and then streaming, and now AI.
Yeah. Oh, gosh. Yeah, I hadn't even thought about the AI part but today yet. But, yeah, that is definitely becoming a part of the scene, whether or not we want it to. And we'll just see. It's the Wild West out there in terms of that.
Yeah, definitely. I kind of had mixed feelings when Napster and Spotify, and I don't think it's fair to the artist. And I'll tell you why. Because if you buy the artist's CD or their album, it's $10, maybe 15, something like that. Mm-hmm. You can play that once and throw it in the garbage, or you can play it until it won't play anymore. The artist gets paid regardless. With streaming, you have to play it over and over and over and over to get the same revenue back to the artist. Now, we all have our favorite songs, but I don't think I've ever played them, 1,000 times. And the numbers don't add up, is what I'm saying. And I've had people on who swear by it because they think, it's all about the democratization of tech. But I disagree. I think artists made better money when your choice was buy the album. What do you think?
Yeah, it's a tricky thing because it's here. It is our reality, right? And so as artists, we have to figure out a way to be able to work within those parameters, right? Streaming is here. People are going to listen through streaming. I listen through streaming. I also own CDs. I do both. I think mixing it is great. I love it when I have fans tell me, I bought your album. I listen to you on Spotify. Sometimes I listen to you on my CD, but most of the time it's Spotify. But I feel like I want to, contribute to you as an artist, but also hear you in a way that's convenient for me. Because a lot of people don't even have CD players anymore. So there's that reality.
Well, that's true.
And also, I will say there's one thing that the streaming world has really opened up, and that is ability to reach out way beyond what artists normally, previously would be able to reach. I have fans that find my music because of streaming all over the world, from playlists that somebody created in Turkey or Mexico City or all of these places where fans found my music and then they dig in deeper because it piqued their interest. And so I can't really say that it's not all bad. Definitely, there's some really good things, but yeah, the percentages, the ratios that are worked out for like per stream revenue to artists, it can very much be improved. We're, there's a lot of people who are trying to make that happen, and I just hope that we're able to sort of strike a better balance because streaming's not going to go away. It's definitely here. But
well, you're right.
We love it. We love a hybrid approach. We love it when people buy our CDs or buy downloads of our music and then also stream it. That's a really awesome way to sort of even the field a little bit.
Well, you're right about the reach. I'll give it that it wouldn't have if you just had a CD sitting in a record store somewhere, being online. But you can be online with a CD as well. I mean, I agree with you. I think a hybrid approach is the more the merrier, basically. The more different types of formats your music is on, the more chance more people are going to hear it. If you can get yourself on other people's playlists, then it has the potential to mushroom, right? Which you wouldn't be able to do. Well, like in the old days, we used to trade record albums. Say, here, I'll trade you Leonard Skinner for Fleetwood Mac. And, because we didn't have the money to go buy it ourselves. And then we would just trade and listen to it and then give them back. But that's not quite the same thing as
not quite.
If you get on a playlist,
Yeah. Yeah, it's like the mixtapes of your
right.
I remember those.
Yeah.
That was a delightful thing, and of course that also could be considered, hey, they're not paying for the music because they're just copying it and putting it on a tape. But it was a way to share things you're passionate about with your friends, and they'd find artists that they didn't realize they liked, and songs that really hit them, and then oftentimes they'd go buy the single back when we had like tape singles. Music is meant to be shared. I think it's just one of those things where we're trying to figure out how to make it so that artists can continue to make art because they are paid for their efforts, because it's never free, right? It's never free to make the music. It's a cost-heavy enterprise to record in the studio and mix it and get it mastered and all of those things. People, it's work, and it definitely, like any work, deserves to have compensation for people who want to use it and enjoy it. So
the other ironic thing about CDs, and then I'll get off this topic and we'll go to something else, is that people are hesitant to go to Amazon and spend $15 and buy your CD. However, they'll happily pick it up when you're performing. And I always found that to be really ironic. Like, they'll go to the merch table and buy your CD, no problem, right? But if they won't get it off of Amazon like before your concert. I always thought that was strange. Funny
That is interesting. I have to say I do kind of love that, though, because it's one of the highlights of live performance for me, to be able to actually interact with people after the show at the merch table, to be able to sign it. Also, generally, like when you buy from a larger a marketplace like that, the percentage that comes back to the artist is quite a bit less than if you buy direct from an artist. So I'm a fan of that.
Well, I mean, I think it's fine.
But I understand what you're saying.
It's fine. But see, it used to be the other way around. It used to be that artists would tour to support the album. And now it's like you tour to support yourself, and the album has become basically a T-shirt or a poster.
That's pretty accurate, I think. Yeah, it's a souvenir for a lot of people.
It's a souvenir. It's not the music anymore. It's just another piece of merchandise. I don't know. I could go on and on. This is kind of a pet peeve of mine anyways, because as you might know or might not, I'm also a musician, although retired at this point. And I can remember in the early 80s when we played in New York, the first encroachment of technology on our livelihood was the dreaded karaoke machine. And we lost a few gigs to these little clubs because the owners didn't want to pay for a live act anymore. They just installed a karaoke machine on the stage and let all the drunk patrons get up there and pretend to sing, and it was very frustrating because we said, well, okay, we've been fired because we've been replaced by a karaoke machine.
Yeah.
And then it's just been one thing after another since then. So that's the early 80s. Now, I mean, I don't know. It depends on who you talk to. The old timers, I think, are particularly crusty. I think people in your age group have adapted, or maybe that's all you know, and have done better with it than us who are, maybe a generation earlier than you.
Yeah, I've seen it from its infancy until now. It is interesting, and I can see both sides of it, and I'm just trying to make it work.
You got to make it work
all
for
you
you.
do is
Yeah.
live in the now, the reality that it is. And yeah, it's got pros and cons. It really does. And I just am glad despite all that, I get to keep doing what I'm doing, because I do have a really lovely fan base that does lend enough, support by buying my albums, by streaming enough of my music to where it does add up, and I'm able to continue doing this as a full-time professional. It feels like a really rare thing to be able to do in this day and age. It's also probably partly because of the kind of music that I do.
Well, I was just going to say,
I think that
I was just going to say that,
jazz
actually.
audiences tend to buy, even though it's not necessarily, there are far more people in the world who are listening to pop music. But as far as the ratio of listenership to actual purchasers, I think it's probably somewhat higher for jazz and jazz, related music.
Well, I think jazz and classical music have a different mindset of the audience, because they really go to listen intently to the music.
Mm-hmm.
If you go to a pop concert, it's almost background. Do you know what I mean? They're there to see whoever
Mm-hmm.
it is. And the music is, I don't know, less paid attention to, if that's the right way to say it. Because there's a lot going on stage. There's lights, there's whistles, there's dancers, there's people taking their clothes off. I mean, there's all kinds of things going on that might not be part of the music per se. It's more of a spectacle, where classical and jazz is really all about the music. They don't care what you're wearing. They want to hear you sing and to hear the band, and that's it. The guy who produced my music back in the day, Stuart Epps, I don't know if you know who he is, but he was one of Elton John's early producers and toured with Elton in the very early days of his career. And we got into this conversation about Elton, and I said, I never understood why Elton felt like he had to come out on stage wearing a duck suit, because his music was so great. It was so powerful. It was captivating. And the duck suit just kind of cheapened it to me. And Stuart just sort of laughed. He said, well, I get it, because you imagine if James Taylor came out on stage in a duck suit and sat down with his acoustic and started singing Rockabye Sweet Baby James, it would be horrible.
Oh.
Do you know what I mean? It would be awful. But Elton could get away with it. And that's what he said. He said Elton just could get away with it. So
a flair for the dramatic.
Yeah, but he didn't start out like that. If you look at the early 1970 videos of him on BBC, very subdued, right? As he got famous, as he got richer, more popular, then he just sort of said, F it. I'm doing, I'm going to do the rhinestones and the duck suit. So, all right, okay, that's fine. But it's just, coming back to my point, his music was really all about the music. And then he took it to more of a spectacle later on. But the music was still great. So I think with jazz and with classical, you're really in a good position, because it is about the music. And, people aren't coming there to dance particularly, right? They're there to sit and listen to you.
Yeah, I mean, it ranges. Of course, we have, I've played some shows where people will definitely loved the dance aspect of it, whether it was, swing dancing or as a performer, it's actually, for me, I really love it when people want to move to the music, but I also love it when an audience is just there to soak it in, But yeah, it definitely, I think the thing that is prevalent in both situations is that people are really listening, whether it's for cues on how they want to move, or whether it's just they're wanting to listen to, the arrangement and the chord structures, or how we're changing it from the last time they heard us because we're improvising things, or especially when I tour in of all the places that I've toured in Japan, people will listen so intently and tell me things about that they heard that I wasn't even aware that were happening with the music, and that's always a really lovely thing, because that's how you know people are really invested. That's commitment right there.
Yeah, it's funny you bring up Japan, because the Japanese audiences, even if you go back to the 1966 Beatles concert at the Budokan, the sound quality was horrible. You couldn't hardly hear them, but people were so quiet in there that I've heard interviews with Paul and George. They said it was a little unnerving because they were used to the screaming, crazy fans, and they got in there and it was like you could hear a pin drop. And they weren't sure if the fans liked them or not, but it turned out that they were just so intent on sitting to listen to the music. It's just too bad that they had such, crappy technology in '66 that they didn't have a good sound system, because the Beatles were fantastic live, but, only the first 10 rows could hear them, probably. They had 100-watt amplifiers. That's not going to go very far in a big stadium.
No.
Let me pivot over to...
That's very, very low for today.
Let me pivot over to your music. I know we got off on a tangent, and I apologize for that. But anytime I get...
Oh, that's okay. I'll talk about music anytime.
Anytime I get musicians on, it's like, it winds me right up. I'm looking at your latest, Dreams Lost and Found. That's your latest album?
It is. It just came out a week and a half ago.
Okay, now, all of these are covers, or are some of these original?
There are 2 originals on there.
Okay.
The tracks called More and Under the Same Moon are both original tunes. And the other 12, it's a 14-track album. It's a long one. The other 12 are either from the American Songbook or jazz standards, or I have like a Joni Mitchell song. I have a Leonard Cohen song. I have a Beatles song. Speaking of Beatles.
I see The Fool on the Hill. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely a variety of style influences on the album.
Do you have to get a license to do that, or is it only you need a license to use their copy, their recording?
It's a complicated sort of scenario, but yes, you do. You have to get a license for releasing it. And then there's also, of course, after the fact, if anybody wants to utilize your version of it, then there's licensing for that. Everything is definitely, you have to be able to give credit and where credit's due, and there's a licensing, fee for utilizing other songwriters' material as it should be, because that's how we songwriters, that's a pretty important part of how we are able to continue to make income from our songs that we put out into the world. And yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. When I saw The Fool on the Hill, I thought, okay, but it's not the same license that you would have to get to use their recording, because...
No, it's not the same.
Yeah, I've heard that those are almost impossible with Beatles songs, that they just simply don't...
Right.
They don't do that. And they're like $250,000 if they do. Yeah.
Yeah, we don't have that kind of budget for this album. No. It's a different process.
It's a different, okay. All right. Yeah, because I've never recorded someone else's songs, so I didn't know how that worked. Okay, well, that's good. So the one that I see on here in big bold letters is Sukiyaki. Now, that's an old song. That's the 1960s one. It came out in Japanese, actually, and then didn't Nat King Cole do a version of that? Or am I thinking of something else?
I couldn't tell you. A lot of people did a version of that. It was mostly done as an instrumental when it first became, of course, the original, which was in Japanese, as you say, by Kyu Sakamoto. He sang it in Japanese, but a lot of the versions, at least the ones that I've heard from that particular era, because it really caught fire overseas too. It was the first international Japanese pop hit. It didn't. I don't think it had English lyrics written for it until much later. And so most of the versions I've heard from that era are instrumental. But then in the 80s, early 80s, the group A Taste of Honey did a version of it that was with an English lyric that was written by one of the members of the duo, Taste of Honey duo, and that is the lyric that I sing on this version.
Oh, okay. All right, great. Well, unfortunately, we can't play it because we've run into problems on YouTube with copyright, and there's nothing worse than having an interview and then saying, and now here's Halie Loren doing Sukiyaki, and there's 4 minutes of silence. You know, so what's the point of that?
Yeah.
But we will certainly put the link in the show notes where people can go and find it to listen to it. And I guess to kind of wind this down, we're running on almost 28 minutes. Where are you going next? Do you have a tour lined up for the summer?
I do. I have many shows that I'm doing this summer and into the fall. But it starts off with a trip. Speaking of Japanese, I'm going to be returning to Japan.
Oh, great.
On tour in Tokyo in late May, and then I will be doing shows all over the West Coast for June, and then in July I'm going to be playing at the Montreal Jazz Festival, among other things, and also some more West Coast shows. And then into late summer, I'll be returning again to Canada, and still kind of building out the tour as we're speaking. There's probably somebody making phone calls about that. But I'm continuing to update things because they're still definitely filling in for the later in the season into the fall, and I'm really excited. I get to play some of this music for people live, and so much of this album, Dreams Lost and Found, was recorded essentially as almost a live album, in that everybody in the studio, except for me, I was in a separate room because I'm the quietest instrument, but everybody else is playing in the same room, so it's all very much live, what you're hearing, the musicians playing, almost as if you would on a stage. And so being able to actually play them live is such a natural feeling thing when you've already created the music to be that kind of a feeling. So I'm really excited. It's going to be great.
So when you tour, do you always tour with the same band, or do you just kind of pull one together before each tour?
Yeah, for many years I did mostly tour with the same band, but in recent years, in like the last, I'd say 6 or 7 years of touring, I have increasingly had a situation where I usually travel by myself, and then I meet up with musicians that I have collaborated with. You know, I've been growing my circles of collaborators by leaps and bounds in recent years. And so I'll oftentimes create a band for a specific show or a run of shows in a region who are local or at least regional. And it has been a really fun way to really diversify sort of the way that the music feels and my approach to it, but also, you know, touring is really expensive. So it has definitely helped to be able to create more opportunities to be able to go more places, because otherwise I wouldn't necessarily be able to, you know, bring a 3-piece band with me everywhere I go, depending on budget situations and all the things. There's a lot of complication that goes into planning a tour, and it's definitely really nice to be able to, you know, have some options on that front, and there's just so many talented, amazing people that I love working with. I love being able to do that. It's been a real creativity booster and relationship building experience that I think has really served a lot of the music really well too. It's been really cool.
Well, I'm happy to hear Montreal. That's a very famous jazz festival. Is Newport Jazz still going, or did that die with COVID?
I I'm not playing theirs this year, so I'm not
You don't
sure.
know? Okay.
I think so, but I'm not. I don't know. I don't know. I could Google it.
Oh, that's all right.
But I am playing the opposite coast in Newport, Oregon this summer.
Oh.
So I don't think you're talking about that one though. But that's going to be a fun show. So I know that one's still happening.
Well, no, I've had different musicians on, and they said, "Oh, I used to play at this place, but it's not there anymore." And I hear that more and more. So it's sad, that some stuff has just gone away, never to return.
Right. It is sad. It's happened quite a bit over the last, definitely the last 3 or 4 years. But even before that, I feel like it's been kind of accelerating in the last 10 plus years. We'll just see. We'll see how it all shakes out. I just, people love live music, and there's still a lot of people who are out there going and supporting live music by attending shows, and then of course there's been a bit of a drop off in some places with that, and so that who knows what's going to happen. But as long as there are people who are going to come out to hear the music, I and any other performer who loves live performing and does it for a living will be there. We'll be doing it.
Great. Well, I'm happy to hear it. And I'm happy to hear about your successes, and I hope you keep going for another 20 years.
I hope so too. Taking care of my voice in the meantime, trying to make it last.
Well, Halie, we got to wind this down. Thanks so much for coming on. It was nice catching up with you. Last question. Do you want to give out your website?
Yeah, absolutely. My website is HalieLoren.com, and the spelling of that is HalieLoren.com. I'm also on all the social media platforms under my name, so you can find me that way too. My website is going through a redesign at the moment, so that'll be debuting later this month, hopefully. But in the meantime, it's still up in its current form, but it'll be in an improved form very soon.
Okay.
So I'm excited about that.
And the latest album is Dreams Lost and Found, and that's been released?
Yes, it's out on all platforms, all of the places where you can buy music online, including my own official store, which is through Bandcamp. So you can find that at halieloren.bandcamp.com. Where you can get physical CDs or you can download the album. Yeah, it's out there. It's everywhere. It's worldwide.
That is fantastic. All right. Well, again, nice talking to you, and best of luck with this year. I hope your tours go well.
Thank you so much. Me too. And it's been so nice to talk to you. Thanks for having me on again.